Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 130 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's going on, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Had a good week so far.
That's good.
It's pretty early in the week, but so far, so good.
Well, let's take what you get.
Got to take it one day at a time, right?
That's exactly what they say.
Yeah, I'm still dealing with, and I say dealing, that might not be the right word, but, with my daughter being gone at college.
Yeah.
I've talked about that a little bit.
A little bit.
It's getting easier. I will say that. There are times where it crops up where all of a sudden I think, you know what? She's not here.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to see her today. I didn't get to talk to her today. And then I get sad.
Yeah.
But it's not every day like it was when we first dropped her off. So it's settling in. Everything's getting a little easier. She's coming home this weekend, so that's good.
Yeah, that makes it nice.
But I don't know. I mean, parents go through it.
Sure.
A lot of parents listening have gone through it.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of parents are thinking, ooh, that's something I'm going to have to go through at some point in time. It's rough. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know parents, they get sad when their kids just elevate to another grade,
Yeah.
Or go off to high school.
They're going to a different school. Yeah.
Yeah. So, your baby went to the bigger school now, and
yeah, my daughter's in high school. But see, that doesn't bother me because I still get to see her every day. I talk to her every day. It's really that aspect that I've had the big problem with. All right, Gibbs, we have some new Patreon supporters. So let's give some shout outs. We had Jack.
Just Jack?
Just Jack.
What's up, Jack?
Megan Hand.
Hey, Megan.
Selena Moran.
What's going on, Selena?
Elizabeth Skaggs.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Jenna Richard.
Hey, Jenna.
Chloe.
What's up, Chloe?
Tracy Vanderspoy.
Vanderspoy?
Or Spoy. I don't know. Spoy.
You don't know.
I'm going to say it 4 different ways, and one of those hopefully is going to be correct.
Probably not neither.
Probably none. CJ Payne.
What's up, CJ?
Che Giski.
Hey, Che Giski.
Ada Rashidian.
Ooh, Rashidian.
Chris Pig.
What's up, Chris?
Randy.
Hey, Randy.
I like the ones like Randy. I know I can say that.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
Pretty easy, yeah.
Jordan Jones. That's an easy name to say. Cheyenne M.
Hey, Cheyenne.
Mia Sarley.
Ooh, Mia.
Tiffany Gray.
What's up, Tiffany?
Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Shalene Yoakum.
Hey, Dwight's daughter or sister or something.
Judith Robb.
Hey, Judith.
Casey Barrow.
What's going on, Casey?
Tyne Olison.
Tyne, that's an interesting name.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Diane Ludwig Rhodes.
Hey, Beethoven's relative.
Amanda Dodge.
Hey, Amanda.
Darlene Perry.
Hey, darling.
And Courtney Eskelly.
Ooh, Eskelly.
And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs.
We'll do it.
This week we selected Elizabeth Roberts.
Hey, Elizabeth, thank you for that.
Been with us a long time. We appreciate that long-term Patreon support. We also appreciate the brand new supporters.
Yeah.
We had some PayPal support as well.
Okay.
We had Suzanne Kuhlman.
Hey, Suzanne.
Tamara Moore.
Hey, Tamara.
Chelsea Camp.
Hey, Cece.
Who always gets excited
yeah,
when we give her a shout out.
Thanks for that, Chelsea.
I think she also became a Patreon supporter recently, so she's going to get that coming up in a future
Double
episode.
dipping.
Michelle Logue.
What's up, Michelle?
And Ken Gretsch.
Hey, Ken.
So big thanks.
Absolutely.
To everyone. All right. Right now, we have a brand new episode out on True Crime All the Time. We're talking about Leonarda Cianciulli. So we're going to Italy.
Yeah.
We're going back a ways. This is not late 30s, early 40s. This is a woman that should scare a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. She should. Very resourceful.
Very conniving. She was a con woman. Yeah. Ultimately, murdered several people, several women, took their money and boiled them.
Yeah. Made some byproducts.
Made some cakes, made some soaps.
Yeah.
It's a strange episode for sure.
But not tasty.
It's not a tasty episode at all, but check that out. Don't forget about our new podcast, The Reviews Are In. All right, man. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All Time Unsolved?
Yeah, let's do it.
We are talking about the Durham family murders that occurred in 1972. And then we have a little bonus, some tie-in cases, the unsolved murders of Patricia Mann and Jessie McBane that occurred in 1971. But before we dive into the murders of the Durham family, we need to talk a little bit about some background that leads us up to the date of the murders. 51-year-old Bryce Durham and his wife, 46-year-old Virginia, along with their 19-year-old son, Bobby Joe, had just moved to the city of Boone about 2 years prior to the murder. So they moved there about 1970-ish. Their daughter, Jenny, was a student at Appalachian State University. She lived in the Boone area in a mobile home in a large trailer park with her husband, Troy Hall, who also attended Appalachian State University.
You know, I remember Appalachian State only because they beat the pants off of Michigan in football like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that was them. Wasn't it? That was a huge. It was one of the biggest upsets ever, I think, in college football.
Absolutely, yeah. Nobody could believe they did it, and of course, being from where we're at, we were loving it.
Oh yeah. We like it anytime Michigan gets beat. But I do remember that. I didn't put 2 and 2 together though. Bryce grew up in Wilkes County and moved his family to Boone after purchasing the local Buick dealership there. He was known as a very professional and honest businessman. His son, Bobby Joe, was just like his father. He was described as a clean-cut kid, a good guy with a big heart.
Yeah. I also read in an article he was in really good shape. Like
worked out?
Yeah. Very athletic built, kind of like
myself?
Like yourself.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning. It's the early 1970s. It's not like it is today.
No.
There was not a lot of emphasis. I mean, you mentioned football. Even football players in the early 1970s, they were big. They weren't cut like they are today. They weren't ripped. They didn't do those type of exercises. A lot of them.
Right. This is I'm trying to think when Schwarzenegger took off, it was later in the 78.
Yeah, it was in the late 70s. Now, they were probably doing that stuff out in California. They certainly weren't doing it probably in Boone, North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't think they were doing Appalachia.
The thing about both Bryce and Bobby Joe was that neither of them were described as outspoken. So you had Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby Joe. They all worked at the car dealership. Bobby was working part-time because he was going to Appalachian State University full-time.
Yeah. That's a lot of work to go to school full-time,
He was following in his father's footsteps. His dad, Bryce, graduated from ASU with a degree in physical education in 1941. So this Appalachian State University, Gibbs, it was kind of in the family.
Yeah.
It was like everybody went there.
Jenny was going there. Bobby Joe. You don't hear Bobby Joe anymore, do you?
Not much.
Yeah.
On Thursday, February 3rd, 1972, Bryce and Bobby Joe were planning on going to the ASU basketball game that night. But first, Bryce had his weekly Rotary Club meeting at the Appalachian Ski Mountain in a town called Blowing Rock.
Actually, I've been to Blowing Rock.
You have? Never even heard of it.
Yeah. Actually went up there. Actually, for work, I had to go to that part of the North Carolina. And Blowing Rock was one of the places I needed to go scout a home site.
I do remember when we went to North Carolina separately.
Yeah.
You and I didn't go together, but I did explore North Carolina a lot, but I never made it to Blowing Rock.
Yeah. I was the lucky one that had to go up there.
I actually went to the, and I can't remember the cities, but where all the NASCAR drivers live.
Yeah.
The place was awesome. I mean, you talk about multi-million-dollar homes.
Yeah.
Those guys were making, back then, they still make a lot of money today, but back then they were making so much money.
All I remember is going back to the airport, I pulled into the car rental place the same time you did. I had this not a very flattering rental car, and you pull in some like hot rod looking like Camaro or something. I can't remember what it was, but it certainly wasn't what I had. Some like Ford Fiesta.
Hey man, you take what you want.
Yeah,
that's the way I live my life.
Yeah, I just remember thinking, what the heck, man.
So speaking of this Rotary Club meeting, the Green Berets were training in the area, and they were going to put on this demonstration of their fighting skills for this group.
That would be cool to see.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Those guys can kick some ass.
Hand-to-hand combat.
After this was over, at around 8:30 p.m., Bryce went back to the car dealership. And it really had been snowing pretty much all day. But at around this time, the snow was really picking up. So much so that Bryce had one of his employees at the lot gas up a new trade-in that had just come in. It was a 4x4.
That's the advantage of owning a car dealership.
Yeah, you pretty much drive around in whatever you want to.
Yeah.
So from there, Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby Joe headed for home. And a neighbor saw them head up their hilly driveway at about 9 p.m.
So getting some form of a timeline here, it seems like, 8:30 left the Rotary, 9 p.m., made it back to their house.
Troy and Jenny were at the ASU library studying from about 5 to 9:30 p.m. And then they were home by 10.
What's everybody going to the library and studying for, though? I don't understand.
Because there was no internet back during this time frame.
All right. I just wondered.
So, speaking of my daughter being at college, I don't know if she'll ever even head to the library. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it today. When I was in college, there was no internet. You had to go to the library.
That's what you did, huh? Clearly, I forgot that part when I went to college, and clearly,
you were so far advanced above everybody else that
I was the library.
You didn't even need to go. People were coming to your room, asking you questions.
They're like, "Is this the library?" I'm like, "Yes, it is. Come on in." But shh.
So Troy and Jenny were hanging out at their mobile home, listening to some music when they got a call. Troy answered the phone. It was his mother-in-law, Virginia. She was in a panic and told him that 3 men were in her house beating up Bryce and Bobby Joe in the back room. And it was at this moment where she's trying to tell this story that the phone went dead. When Troy tried to call back, all he got was a busy signal. So he told his wife, Jenny, what her mother had said during the call. And he said, you know what? We have got to get over there right now.
Yeah, it definitely would be alarming to get that type of phone call, right?
You would be in a panic to get over there, try to help, see what's going on. You couldn't get over there fast enough.
No, just the things running through your head would just drive you crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I know it would me.
Which guns do I need? Where's all my ammo? Where's my backup ammo? So Troy ran out of the mobile home, got into the car to start it up, but it wouldn't start. Luckily, his next door neighbor was home and offered to drive Troy and Jenny over to her parents' house. Now, there was a bonus to this neighbor being home in the form that he was also a private investigator.
It's good to have.
It's very nice to have. His name was Cecil Small. Once they got to the Durham house, they couldn't get up the hill, right? I mentioned it. They had kind of a hilly driveway. There was so much ice and snow that Cecil's car wouldn't make it up. So they had to walk. So Troy and Cecil are walking up the hill.
Yeah.
They left Jenny in the car for safety reasons,
sure,
I assume. And they approached the door. And I can imagine, Gibbs, they approached it very cautiously. They had to be a little bit wary about, what was going on in this house. As they walked into the house, the lights were on, the TV was on, and what they see first is that the entire house is turned upside down. It's trash.
Yeah.
As if someone was going through everything, turning things over, looking for something.
Exactly.
Troy saw the phone laying on the floor. It had been ripped out of the wall.
Scary.
It's scary because those thoughts go running through your mind. Why does somebody need to rip the phone out of the wall? They don't want you to call anybody for help. So this was a split level house. Troy and Cecil are making their way through, but they have yet to find any of the 3 members of the Durham family. But they hear some water running. So they're trying to figure out where it's coming from. They get up to the bathroom and they find a horrific scene.
It's not something you would expect to see at all.
No, I don't think you would ever be prepared for this. Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby Joe are on their knees. Their hands are tied behind their backs, and they're leaning over the tub with their heads submerged into the bathtub. And this water is so full, it's overflowing.
Yeah.
Because the water's just running.
Yeah. I mean, it had to be a horrific sight to see. You know, Troy seeing his mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law dead with their heads submerged underneath water. I mean, it's shocking. It's hard to imagine what Troy had to be thinking about at that moment because, he's got to tell Jenny, I just found your dad, mom, and brother dead. And the way that he found them, that had to be so difficult for him to do at that moment.
Yeah, it's not a position that any of us would ever want to be in. Troy and Cecil walked across the street to a neighbor's house and called the Boone Police Department. This was around 10:50 p.m., according to the dispatch records. The dispatcher wrote in his file that the caller was really shook up and was begging for help. And who wouldn't be?
Yeah. Not shocked there.
You and I often talk about people that don't act the way that a lot of other people think that they should in a certain situation. This is exactly how I would expect someone to act when they have just found members of their family murdered in a bathtub. Be crying, you would be blubbering, just begging for somebody to come out and help. The police got on scene at around 11 p.m. And when we say police, Gibbs, we're not talking about one car.
No.
We're not talking about 2 cars or 2 policemen. They sent a dozen.
And you're going to have sheriffs from 2 counties. You're going to have the Boone City Police, and then the neighboring city police show up. So you got 12 police officers there. And they're not all from the same force.
It was like they sounded the alarm bells and the cavalry came running. But I think we also have to take into account, probably the size of the city of Boone. So Gibbs, on both of our true crime podcasts, we talk a lot about crime scenes and specifically about crime scene evidence and its preservation.
Sure.
That's going to be very important in this case as well.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an issue.
You mentioned how many different officers are at this scene. So it's great that many officers showed up. The problem is it's a little unorganized.
Yeah, kind of in my head, I'm thinking of The Fugitive, that movie with
Harrison Ford.
When the train rolls over and Tommy Lee Jones shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And he's watching, everybody's trying to figure out who's going to run this show. They got all these different agencies there. And that's what this reminds me of. They got too many cooks in the kitchen.
That is one of the big problems, right? When you have multiple jurisdictions, well, who's running the show and who's directing traffic? I think, like I said, this was unorganized. You had a lot of officers just pretty much walking in and out of different crime scenes. I think this is where the issue of crime scene evidence comes in because, how well are they able to preserve whatever they find, and how good is it when, You just have all these people trampling through the house.
Touching things maybe they shouldn't be touching.
Exactly. And you don't know.
Right. Just the fact that they're walking through, they're transferring things on their shoes that probably shouldn't be there.
Now, one thing that all the officers noticed was that the home was tossed, the TV was on, but they also saw that there was food on the kitchen table. There were drinks on the table for 3 people. So what it appeared to be was a scene where the 3 members of the family were either about to eat dinner or in the process of eating dinner when they were interrupted. And then they made their way into the bathroom and they saw the 3 victims leaning over the tub with their heads submerged into the overflowing water. Investigators began talking to neighbors, and they found out that someone saw a green and white 4-wheel drive GMC Jimmy pulling out of the Durham's driveway at around 10:30 or 10:35 p.m. And I don't remember this Jimmy. Gibbs had to look it up.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of a Ford Bronco.
Yeah.
A little bit back in the day. What's interesting is that they're coming out again with a GMC Jimmy in 2020.
There you go.
So, and that's the thing, man. They cannot think of new names. They just keep
reinventing the old name.
Reinventing the old models.
So, not the Ford Fiesta, because we know they're active. What was the other car?
Active. There's a Festiva. What was the other car we were talking about the other day? Chevette?
No, it was
Opel.
Opel.
We talk about a lot of stuff.
Wonder if they're going to bring the Opel back.
I doubt it.
It should be some cool looking sports car.
So it was around 1 a.m. when North Carolina State Police found an abandoned vehicle that matched the same GMC Jimmy seen leaving the crime scene. It was still running, and it was found just up the road from the Durham's home. Inside the Jimmy, they found a pillowcase with some silverware and some other items from the house.
So it looks like a robbery, is what it looks like. Sounds like they stole the Jimmy, took off in it, and took some fancy silver. Look, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a pillowcase full of goods from the house, that would immediately kind of jump out at you as this was some type of robbery. As the police researched the plates, they tied it back to Bryce's dealership. And the next day they talked to one of the managers, and they discovered that Bryce drove the Jimmy home with the family because of the snowstorm and the fact that he wanted the 4x4 to get to the game that they were going to later that night. So like you said, Gibbs, whoever killed these people, it seemed to police as though they took some things from the house, they stole the Jimmy, and then they left it down the road, most likely switched into the car that they had come in.
Yeah, that seems plausible.
It sure does.
Yeah.
So the police talked to Troy, which you know they would. They wanted to hear his events of what happened that night. Now remember, there were a lot of officers on the scene. There were some officers, some investigators that didn't believe his story. And I think a lot of it had to do with the phone call that Troy said that Virginia made to their house.
Yeah.
Police thought, well, how could Virginia make this phone call? How was she free? They found her tied up in the bathtub. At what point during this encounter was she free to make a phone call while the others were being beaten? Why would she not have been tied up? So that was a population, but there were a lot of officers that thought, no, it definitely could have happened exactly the way that Troy said it did.
Right.
And I'm in that camp. You know, I'm thinking if intruders bust in, who are they going to target first? The 2 individuals that represent the biggest threat.
Right. Because we said that Bobby Joe was a pretty healthy specimen, right? He was in good shape.
Yeah, he was in good shape. So you've got a dad, you've got a son. Those would be the people to tangle with first.
Right.
And you can't tie anybody up until they're subdued.
Right.
It's not like you can just walk in and start tying people up. So it sounds very plausible to me that there was a vicious fight where intruders were tangling with Bryce and Bobby Joe. And during that time, Virginia could have been able to make it to the phone and call Troy and Jenny.
Yeah.
Not sure why investigators thought that was so implausible. The police got the autopsy report back the next day, which is pretty quick based on a lot of the cases that we do.
Right.
And it said that all 3 victims were strangled by a rope. That determination was made by some burn marks left behind by the rope. They said that Virginia died from the strangulation, but Bryce and Bobby Joe, even though they were strangled, their cause of death was ruled as drowning.
And so it makes sense, all 3 were strangled. Virginia died from the strangulation, and it took the drowning to finish the 2 guys off. I think they were probably, and they should have been probably passed out, and it was just once they were submerged underneath the water, that's what it took to just actually kill them.
Yeah, I believe that's what the coroner concluded. One of the things that police found at the Durham home was a night deposit money bag, and it was just laying on the floor of the house. And Gibbs, it had a pretty sizable amount of cash in it.
Yeah, I mean, remember the house was torn up and tossed, and by the time they go through it and filter through all the mess, like you said, they found this bag.
But they also found some other valuables in the house, and it wasn't like they were hidden. These were things that were out in plain sight, right? In plain view. Anybody would have seen them.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder. So if this was a robbery, then why didn't they just take the money and the jewels?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to take a pillowcase full of silver. Okay.
Yeah.
But you've got a big money bag here full of cash. You've got jewelry that's not hidden. It's out in plain sight. I mean, did these people get nervous when they found out that Virginia was on the phone, right? Obviously, they got her off the phone. They ripped it out of the wall. But did that scare them to the point where they had to ditch their entire plan and just take the pillowcase and run?
Yeah. Or was this all staged to look like a robbery? Did they toss the house? They didn't care about the money. They left that there. They took what they could, made it look like it was a quick in and out robbery.
Well, I think that's the question.
Because if you think about the bathroom, the way that they were in there, the way hands tied behind their back, the way they being strangled, doesn't really seem like something some robbers would do.
For me, it comes down to whether or not these 3 individuals saw the robbers.
Yeah.
Now, you would think if you're planning on entering a house, knowing that people are there, you would have something over your face.
Yeah.
If you did, why do you need to kill these 3 individuals? You could tie them up, leave them in a bedroom, take whatever you want. To me, the only reason to kill them, if this is strictly a robbery,
right,
is because somehow you either forgot to bring a mask or, something to put over your face, or in the altercation with these 2 men, one of them came off or both of them came off.
Right.
And they got to look at your face.
And then you had to do what you had to do.
Exactly. But even with that, I still don't understand not taking a massive amount of money. When I say massive, a pretty large amount of money and some jewelry and other valuables.
Exactly. Because if you really wanted to sell the robbery, wouldn't you take the money bag, have the police find that in the car, or just take the money bag and not have them find it in the car?
Yeah.
Like, as you ran away, you took the,
They're probably going to figure out later that there's a missing deposit bag with a bunch of money in it and assume that it was at the house and stolen. So again, we talk about all of this because it doesn't make sense it's important because investigators are going to have a hard time making sense of it as well. The police interviewed family, friends, co-workers, and about 200 other persons of interest.
So it sounds like they're doing a thorough job, which...
Well, they're sure talking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they worked this case for a little bit over a year until they decided to make some arrests. Police arrested 4 white males for the murders of the 3 Durham family members, but the prosecutors didn't feel like they had enough to move forward with to trial. They felt that the case was too weak, and they ultimately released these 4 individuals. Now, one theory that cropped up from some investigators was that they felt whoever did this was unhappy with Bryce coming into the area, buying this Buick dealership, because apparently there was some type of syndicate, or this has been alleged, that was involved in the sale of used cars. And that on its own wouldn't be a bad thing.
Right.
The problem is they were rolling back the miles. They were changing titles, and then they were selling these cars to the general public. Investigators thought this was something Bryce wouldn't have gone along with, and people were unhappy about it. Because we mentioned up front, people described Bryce as a good, honest man. So police thought this is probably not something that he was willing to participate in.
And if he knew about it, I'm sure that they were worried that maybe he would go to the proper authorities to turn it in. And I'm sure it was a cash cow for the syndicate. You're taking cars that might have been worth X, but because you roll the miles back,
they're worth double.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that had 60,000 miles now has 20, 30. That's a big difference in value.
Yeah.
For sure. But I want to touch on something that you just said, right? They were probably worried that Bryce would have gone to the police. And most likely he would have. If this was something that he knew about and he was the type of person that everybody said he was, he probably wasn't going to sit idly by and let these people cheat the general public.
Right. And it was actually thought that he had gone to the police to turn them in. But because of some corruption in the police department, it got back to the syndicate, who sent out 3 or 4 men to deal with Bryce and his family.
In 1974, Bryce's parents reached out to the newly appointed attorney general, and he assured them that this case was a top priority for him and his team. He talked to them a few times every month during his term. He gave them updates when he had anything to share. In 1974, towards the end of the year, he told them that they looked into some rumors regarding a military special ops team. And apparently this team was doing some very intense training.
And I think this goes back to the Green Berets being up at that Appalachian ski resort that he went up and saw, that did the hand-to-hand combat.
For the Rotary Club.
Rotary Club. Yeah.
So the theory was that there were some members of this team that took their training to, I guess, what you'd call, Gibbs, a higher level.
Yeah.
And they used the family as a testing ground for some new tactics that they would later use in the field.
Well, I think it's a pretty stretchy a word, would you say? Stretchy?
Yeah, I think it's pretty far out there, to be honest with you.
But there was a lot of communication back in the day about that, and I think it's good that he addressed it with, Bryce's parents.
Well, he did say it was a rumor.
Yeah. And I think it had legs, just when I say legs, not really sturdy legs, but
it had a little bit of legs.
Yeah, because people were thinking, well, the government, they're the type of people who can come in and clean up the scene. They have the ability to do things others can't.
Now, the police were able to confirm that there was this special ops training group in the area, but they concluded that they didn't have any responsibility for the murders of the Durham family.
I just think a lot of people probably reach at straws. The longer a case goes unsolved, the more things you try to throw up on the wall.
Sure. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
But as you and I talk about, some straws are a little more plausible than others.
Yeah.
Right? To think that this group of Green Berets is going to test out some of their new tactics on a wholesome family, that makes no sense whatever. First of all, it goes against everything that
they're there for.
A Green Beret believes in.
Yeah. They're there to protect.
Yeah. That is just so far out there that to me, it's almost laughable.
Yeah. It's almost right up there with when we did the Bennington Triangle with Sasquatch. Now,
I will say it's probably not that far out there as Sasquatch, but because, to be honest, Gibbs, just because you're in the military, just because you're in the Green Beret, doesn't mean that everybody takes those values as seriously as others. We profile a lot of people on True Crime all the time that served in the military.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot.
But those are usually one-off individuals.
Right.
This theory hinges on a whole group of Green Berets deciding together to do this. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. But the cold case investigator who's in charge of this case today feels that this was some type of professional hit. Somebody went into the house, made the scene look like a robbery gone wrong, but it was all staged to cover up the fact that it was a hit. To this guy, it's just obvious. This was a hit for hire.
Yeah. And I get that. I can see that.
Yeah, I see it. It doesn't mean he's not open to all leads. He hasn't locked into that, to the exclusion of everything else. I think you can come down on that side, that this was some type of a professional hit, but then you have to explain why or the reasoning behind it. It could be the syndicate that we talked about.
Right.
The rolling back of odometers and the fear that, Bryce was going to blow the whistle on them. But regardless, this case remains unsolved today. The county sheriff, the Boone Police Department, they continue to work any leads they get. They also continue to run prints found at the crime scene in the hopes that one day they'll get a match.
Yeah, you never know, right?
No, you don't, because just because somebody is not in the database today, or they haven't been in there for the last 40 years, doesn't mean that they won't all of a sudden pop up, get in trouble, do something wrong, make a mistake, and have their prints end up in a database. And then all of a sudden you get a match. And then there's the DNA, right? Something you and I talk a lot about in these unsolved cases. The State Bureau of Investigations, they're hoping that some of these new advancements in DNA analysis will lead to a suspect.
Yeah.
And maybe an arrest. And it very well could.
Hope for the best.
Bryce Durham's parents died without ever knowing who killed their son, their daughter-in-law, and their grandson. Troy and Jenny Hall moved from the area not long after the murders occurred. They eventually got divorced in 1976. Troy later got his law degree and owns a construction firm in Georgia. Jenny remarried and lives in Washington State. Gibbs, you have to think that this was very tough, right, on everyone involved. The parents, Troy and Jenny.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that could wreck a marriage, and maybe it did wreck theirs. I don't know that for a fact.
It'd be stressful for sure for both, but I mean, this was Jenny's whole family.
Yeah.
Gone in one night. I don't know how you recover from that. It's tough.
And really, she's, as far as I know, the only one still alive that was part of this extended family.
Yeah, that's true.
So probably more than anybody, she's the one that wants to see this solved.
Yeah.
I imagine she wants someone to pay for what they did to her family.
Yeah, taking them away like that. I find it interesting that she moved probably as far as possible.
It's about as far as you can get.
Yeah, and I can see that, though. I can see just wanting to be away from anything that could possibly remind me of what happened.
All right, so that is it for the case of the Durham family. But we said we had some other unsolved murders that we wanted to talk about. There wasn't quite enough information on the Durham family murders alone to carry an entire episode. But there is somewhat of a tie-in. The case we're going to talk about is an unsolved double murder that also happened in North Carolina in the 1970s.
Yeah, it's a little tie-in there, but I found it interesting.
So we're talking about the unsolved murders of Patricia Mann and Jessie McBane in 1971. Patricia was a 20-year-old nursing student working and studying at the Watts Hospital just inside Durham, North Carolina. She was dating Jessie McBane, who was a year younger than she was. He too was in school at North Carolina State University. Jessie and Patricia were going to a Valentine's Day dance at her hospital college. They arrived at the dance. People saw the couple, said they had a nice time, and Jessie and Patricia left the dance around 11:30 p.m.
Well, she had a curfew of 1 o'clock, so they had a little time to maybe go find something else to do before she had to be back. I think back then, those nursing schools were probably pretty strict, you know.
They might lock the door on you.
Yeah.
If you weren't back by curfew, you might not have gotten in. I don't know. So you mentioned that they probably wanted to find something else to do. This was a young couple. They were excited to be together, and they decided to go park at one of the more popular lovers' lanes. This was in a new subdivision that had a bunch of cul-de-sacs, but they had yet to build any houses.
So perfect location, actually.
It really is.
You just had to drive back there, find an empty cul-de-sac, and park.
And the cul-de-sac is perfect, right? Make the loop, point back out.
Yeah.
You can see who's coming. There shouldn't really be anybody behind you. There won't be any traffic-wise.
When I was 16, that's what we did. We went to one of these new subdivisions, and we parked back in kind of same setup. Yeah.
Hey, you don't have to brag about it, man. All right.
When I was 12. No.
The next morning was a Saturday. Patricia never made it back to her dorm. In fact, she was nowhere to be found. Her friends started to get extremely worried when she missed class.
And she missed her shift at the hospital, too.
So they knew that something wasn't right. So a few of her friends drove over to that Lover's Lane spot, and they saw Jessie's car parked there.
You kind of be happy that you see the car, but you'd also be nervous, right? Because why is the car still there?
Well, I think I'd be more nervous than happy, to be honest with you. Why would the car be there overnight?
Right.
A lot of things would be going through my head.
Yeah. Especially when you decide to approach the car.
And that's what they did, right? They walked up to the car and it's empty. No Patricia, no Jessie. All they saw were their coats in the back seat. So these girls called the Durham police. They also called friends, family. They called other hospitals to see if maybe they were hurt. No luck. Nobody knew where Patricia and Jessie were.
At first, the police thought maybe these lovebirds just took a bus to get out of town, to get married, to start a life somewhere else.
Okay, I get that. Wouldn't it make sense to drive your car to the bus station?
I would think so. Or take your car to wherever you want to go, right?
I mean, it doesn't make sense to leave it in a cul-de-sac, walk to a bus station, and get on a bus. The police continued their search efforts for weeks. They followed up on any lead that came in, but it was on February 25th, 1971, that a construction worker doing some surveying in the woods off a dirt road came across what he thought looked like a body part sticking out from some leaves around a tree. And as this guy got up to that spot, I think Gibbs, he very quickly knew this was a body.
Yeah, had to be alarming.
So he called the police. They came out to the site, and what they found was a scene out of a horror movie.
It really is, you know, when you think about it, it's exactly the way you describe it.
They found Jessie and Patricia tied to a large tree with rope around their hands and their head. Both of them had been strangled, but there was no theft involved here because both of these individuals had some valuables on their person, money, other things of value.
Class rings, things like that.
The other thing was that they determined there was no sexual assault. Patricia was beaten severely. She had pretty massive internal injuries that showed she had been kicked or possibly stomped in her abdomen, her midsection. As they did their investigation, they found some beer bottles and some cigarette butts back where Jessie's car was parked. They were found on the outside of the car. But that's confusing, right? Police have to figure out, were these beer bottles and cigarette butts from Jessie and Patricia?
Right.
That they had maybe thrown out of the car or placed out of the car? Or did these come from the killer or killers? Or was it from some other people just hanging out there in the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, the day before.
You don't know.
Right.
The Durham police pulled in help from both Durham and Orange County sheriffs, the State Department of Investigation, as well as the DMV Theft Division and the FBI. The issue they had was communication.
Yeah, they didn't communicate well with each other.
And we see that a lot, right? When we have all of these different jurisdictions come together, communication always seems to be one of the biggest issues. You know, I think back to a case like Zodiac. Zodiac committed murders in multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And some of the people didn't know what the other people knew.
Which is critical. I think as a good investigator, the more you know, right?
I think it's critical if you want to solve the case as quickly as possible,
right.
Which to me is key because a lot of times the longer it goes, the harder it is.
And you think it's the reason that back then they did that was because they wanted the notoriety of like, we solved it, not you guys.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of that. Sometimes even today, probably.
Yeah.
You know, we're the king of the mountain. We're going to take charge. If and when this thing's solved, it's going to be us that gets the glory.
Right.
Rather than we all share. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time, but
no.
I'm sure it does still today.
And it probably could be politically motivated.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. But what I think happened, Gibbs, as a result of this extremely poor communication was that maybe some leads got dropped by other agencies. Maybe somebody had some great information that coupled with information from another agency would have been unbelievable information, right? But the information as it was separate wasn't enough. I don't know. You have things like that. They did have some suspects, but they were cleared after taking polygraphs. So, you know, we wanted to talk about this case. It's still a cold case. This is another one where there's a lot of hope surrounding the recent advancements in DNA.
Sure.
For the simple fact alone, we know we have cigarette butts. When I say we, they have cigarette butts.
They've got the rope that was used.
So hopefully this will be one maybe in the near future that we'll hear about where a suspect is developed, an arrest is made, and a case is solved.
Yeah, I love when you see these news alerts come across about these old cases that through the results of DNA, they have now arrested somebody.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I still get chills when I think about the arrest of Joseph J. D'Angelo.
Yeah.
I mean, it was strange for me because, Morph and I were in the middle of this big Golden State run on criminology. All of a sudden, this guy gets arrested.
Right.
But it's not just the big, very well-known cases. It's exciting when a case you've never heard of, or maybe just a little bit about,
right,
gets solved because, like you and I talk about, there's family.
Yeah.
There are loved ones of these victims that have been waiting 20, 30, 40 years to finally either find out exactly what happened, or maybe even more importantly, have somebody have to stand up in front of a jury of their peers and take responsibility for what they did.
It's a beautiful thing, man.
And pay the price.
Yeah.
It is. We got voicemails, Gibbs. You want to hear some of those?
Yeah, let's hear some voicemails.
Hey guys, Josh, Kansas. Got one you're not going to want to miss. Lisa Montgomery out of Melbourne, Kansas. And it's truly a sad story. I went to high school with her daughter. Look it up. See what you think. Keep your own time ticket.
All right. He likes to keep his voicemail short and sweet, which I can appreciate.
Gets to the point. That's your type of voicemail.
It is. So that is a case we need to look into.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name's India. I just discovered podcast, and yours was the first one I discovered, and I love you guys. Thank you for everything that you do. I'm trying to binge you out. I'm a mail lady, so I listen to you every day on my route, and it helps my day go way quicker. So thanks again. I'm Team Gibby. Keep your own time tickets.
Deliver that mail. I like that.
Well, I was going to say something really nice about India until she said she was Team Gibby.
Were you? You're still say it.
Yeah, I will. So what I was going to say is I have a special place in my heart for mail carriers.
You do.
Because I was a mail carrier for a short time, for a summer while I was home from college, but it was cool. I loved that job.
I loved seeing you guys out there walking when I drove by you in my UPS truck.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have to wear the uniform, but I had my license. I got to drive the truck, but I did have one of those routes where, I'd park, have to walk a big loop, get back in the truck, go to the next spot, do it all over again. One of my favorite jobs of all time, though.
Good exercise, man.
Well, good exercise. You get to talk to people, but you don't have somebody breathing down your neck like you do in the corporate world.
Oh, yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, you're kind of your own person out there,
Well, I think you're always your own person, but
well, I don't know.
Some of us are other people.
Yes.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name is Chelsea Kitzler. I'm a fellow Ohioan. Just wanted to let you guys know that I am a huge TCAT fan. I just finished binging all of True Crime all the time. I was so excited to start TCAT Unsolved. I saved all of the episodes so I could listen all at once, but unfortunately I could only find the last 6 months, so I decided to go ahead and subscribe to Stitcher Premium, and I am not one who buys subscriptions, but obviously I had to make the exception because it's TCAT. I'm so obsessed with True Crime all the time. You guys are my favorite podcast and the only one that I listen to for true crime. I love you guys. Thanks for all of your hard work, and I am Team Mike Squared.
All right. Love it.
I do too.
Now, that's a rarity, I believe. I mean, there's a lot of people that like what we do. There's a lot of people that like our podcast, but I don't believe, Gibbs, that there are a lot of people that listen to us exclusively. From our interactions, most true crime podcast folks listen to a large number of podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
True crime podcasts.
20 plus, right?
Yeah. So that I think is somewhat of an anomaly, but I'm happy with it. It's fine. I love it.
I like the editing you did there, though. You found a way to make her say Mike Square instead of Team Gibby.
Yeah. That was editing magic.
Yeah.
I somehow changed Team Gibby to Mike Square.
Yeah, it's good. Good job.
Hi guys, want to thank you for all that you do. I love your podcast. I'm binging it now. I just finished listening to Richard Ramirez, spooky guy. Outside of thanking you, I have to give you guys some crap. Gibby, this is for you. All shaps are assless. And this is coming from a cowgirl in Idaho. So the other thing is, it's not chaps, it's shaps. So I just had to throw that out there at you. You guys keep doing what you're doing. You guys really make my day. And keep your own time ticking. Thanks.
Oh, the chaps, which I will never stop saying it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can, but chaps, is that related to chaparral?
I don't know.
Because you say it the same way.
But I would just say they should spell it the right way then.
But we say that a lot about city names, people's names.
Yeah. And mine are assless. You just don't like me wearing them in here assless.
Yeah. I mean, literally, they have no ass in them.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all the voicemails. We always do. But that's it. That is it for another episode of True Crime All Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.